"Things are different now, Mom?" She said it like she was commenting on the weather, quiet, casual, as if those 5 words wouldn't stay with me long after she hung up the phone. I remember staring at the wall after the call ended, not crying, not yet. Just listening to the silence in my kitchen. The kettle had already finished boiling. It clicked softly, then settled. I didn't move to pour it because something inside me had already started to shift, and I didn't yet understand what I had just lost. Before that call, my life had a rhythm to it, not an exciting one, not the kind people write about, but it was steady, predictable, full in its own quiet way. I woke up every morning at 6, even on weekends. My body never learned to sleep in after retirement. I'd make tea, open the window just a little, and let the early air come in. It always smelled faintly of damp earth and distant traffic. Then I would sit at the small wooden table by the window. The same table my husband Everett had insisted we keep, even when we remodeled the kitchen 15 years ago. "It has memory," he used to say, running his hand over the scratches. Everett had been gone for 7 years by then. Sometimes I still caught myself making 2 cups of tea. Most mornings I didn't correct myself until I was already sitting down. After tea, I would water the plants, check the mail, call my sister on Tuesdays, grocery shopping on Thursdays, and Sundays belonged to my daughter, Daphne. Even now, saying her name feels like something delicate in my mouth. She used to come over every Sunday afternoon, always around 3, never earlier, never later. She was like that, structured, precise. She'd bring something small, a loaf of bread from that bakery she liked. Or those lemon pastries I could never quite recreate at home. We would sit together in the living room. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. She'd scroll through her phone, showing me pictures, her office, a new plant she bought, a coworker's dog. I didn't always understand why those things mattered, but I listened anyway, because listening was how I stayed close to her. When she was younger, she used to talk more about school, friends, the books she was reading. She would sit on the floor, leaning against my knees, and speak without stopping, as if she had been holding everything in all day just to tell me. I never rushed her. I never told her to be quiet. I thought maybe that was enough. Daphne had always been independent. Even as a child, she didn't cling the way other children did. She liked doing things on her own, dressing herself, packing her school bag, solving her own problems before asking for help. I used to feel proud of that. People would say, "You're lucky. She's so self-sufficient," and I would smile, but sometimes late at night I would wonder if I had mistaken distance for strength. Everett used to tell me not to overthink it. "She knows you're there," he'd say. "That's what matters." So I believed him. For years, I believed that love didn't always need to be loud to be real. After Everett passed, Daphne became quieter, not distant, just careful. She came over more often at first, checked on me, helped me sort through his things. There was one evening I remember clearly. We were sitting on the floor in the bedroom, surrounded by boxes. His shirt still smelled faintly like him. I had one in my hands. I couldn't fold it. Daphne gently took it from me. "You don't have to do this all at once," she said. Her voice was steady. But her hands, they trembled just slightly. That was the moment I realized she was grieving too, not just as my daughter, but as someone who had lost a father she didn't know how to live without. After that, we found a kind of balance. She didn't talk much about her feelings, neither did I, but we were there, and I thought that was enough. The changes didn't happen all at once, they never do. At first it was small things. She started coming later on Sundays. "Work has been busy," she said. I didn't question it. Then she began canceling some weekends. "Just this once, Mom." I told her it was fine because I didn't want to be the kind of mother who made her feel guilty for having a life. Then the calls became shorter. Where we used to talk for 20 minutes, it became 10, then 5. Sometimes she sounded distracted, like she was doing something else while we spoke. "Are you okay?" I asked once. "Of course," she said quickly, "just a lot going on." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. They build their own lives. That's what we raise them to do. Still, there was a moment. A small one, but it stayed with me. It was a Sunday. I had set the table, 2 plates, 2 cups. The lemon pastries she liked were on a small white dish in the center. 3 o'clock came, then 4. I checked my phone. No message, no call. By 5, I put everything away, carefully, as if she might still come, and I didn't want her to see that I had been waiting. She called later that evening. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot." Forgot such a simple word. I smiled into the phone. It's all right, I said. These things happen. And they do, but something in me shifted again. A few weeks later, she mentioned someone, not directly, just in passing. We went to this new place downtown, she said. Oh, just someone from work. Her tone changed slightly, not defensive, but closed. I didn't press. I told myself she would tell me when she was ready, because that's what I had always done. Waited, given her space, trusted that she would come to me. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I remember because I had just finished watering the plants. The kitchen still smelled faintly of damp soil. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice sounded different, not distant, not rushed, just decided. We spoke for a few minutes. Small things, weather, groceries, my sister's latest complaint about her neighbor. Then there was a pause, a long one. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. I sat down slowly. "Yes, things are different now, Mom." I waited. I thought she would explain, but she didn't. "I'm in a different place in my life," she continued. "I have more responsibilities, more commitments." I nodded again, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand," I said softly, "and I might not be able to come by as often," she added. "That's all right," I said, too quickly, too easily. There was another pause. "I just wanted you to know," she said. Then after a moment, "I have to go, I'll call you soon." And just like that, the line went quiet. I sat there for a long time after that. The kettle clicked again. The house felt larger somehow, or maybe I just felt smaller inside it. I told myself I understood. I told myself this was normal. I told myself she was just growing, but something about the way she said it, not "I'll be busy," not "I'll visit less," just "things are different now," as if something had already changed. And I was the last to notice. That night I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying her voice in my mind. The pauses, the careful way she chose her words, and beneath it all something unspoken, something she hadn't told me, but that I could feel. Like a door quietly closing in another room without anyone announcing it. I didn't know it yet, but that call wasn't the beginning of the change. It was the confirmation, and what I would discover in the weeks that followed would make me question everything I thought I understood about my place in her life, and whether I had ever really been part of it at all. The next Sunday, I still set the table. I told myself I wouldn't. I even stood in the kitchen that morning holding just one plate, reminding myself of what she had said. Things are different now, but when 3 o'clock came, my hands moved the way they always had. 2 plates, 2 cups, the small white dish in the center, lemon pastries. It wasn't hope exactly, it was habit, or maybe something softer than hope, something that didn't ask questions. The house felt unusually quiet that afternoon, not empty, just listening. I sat in the living room with the television on low, though I wasn't watching it. Every small sound made me glance toward the door, a car passing, footsteps outside, the faint echo of someone else's gate closing. At 4 I stood up and adjusted the curtains. At 4:30 I checked my phone, nothing, no message, no call. I sat back down. And for the first time I didn't tell myself she might still come. Instead I looked at the second cup on the table. The tea had gone cold. A thin film had formed on the surface. I don't know why, but that small detail unsettled me more than anything else. Because it meant time had passed, and I had been sitting there long enough not to notice. By 5 I cleared the table, slower than usual, not carefully this time, just quietly. I wrapped the pastries and placed them back in the container. I knew I wouldn't eat them. I rarely did when she wasn't there. Some things didn't taste the same when they weren't shared. She didn't call that evening, or the next day, or the day after that. On Wednesday I picked up the phone myself. It rang longer than usual. When she answered, her voice sounded distracted. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "I just wanted to check in." "Oh, everything's fine," she replied quickly. "Sorry, it's been a busy few days." "I understand," I said. There was a pause. In the background I heard something, a voice. A man's voice, low, indistinct, saying something I couldn't quite make out. Daphne responded to it, but not to me. "Just a second," she said, her voice turning slightly away from the phone. I sat very still. I hadn't imagined it. There was someone there. When she came back, her tone had shifted again, softer, but also more distant. "Sorry about that." "It's all right," I said carefully. "Are you with someone?" Another pause. "Yes," she said, just that, no explanation, no name. I waited. She didn't continue. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "A friend?" "You could say that," she replied. There was something in her tone, not defensive, not embarrassed, just final. as if she had already decided how much I was allowed to know. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my lap. For a long time, my mind didn't rush ahead. It didn't jump to conclusions. It simply stayed with that moment. The voice in the background, the way she had answered, you could say that it wasn't secrecy. Not exactly, it was distance. A quiet line drawn where there hadn't been one before. I tried not to think too much about it. I told myself she was an adult, of course she would meet someone. Of course she would have a life that didn't include me in every detail. That was natural, that was healthy. Still, I couldn't remember the last time she had told me something personal without me asking first, and now, even when I did ask, she gave me just enough to close the conversation. The following week, I went to the grocery store earlier than usual. I didn't need much, just a few things, but I found myself walking slower through the aisles, picking up items I didn't really need. A second brand of tea, a different kind of bread, things Daphne used to like but hadn't asked for in months. At the checkout, I realized I had filled the basket more than usual. The young cashier smiled politely. "Having guests?" she asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. "No," I said softly, "just stocking up." She nodded, already scanning the next item. The moment passed, but it stayed with me longer than I expected. That Friday, my sister called. She talked about her usual things, her neighbor, her back pain. The television shows she thought I should watch. I listened, answered where I needed to. Then, after a pause, she said, "How's Daphne?" It was such a simple question, I could have answered it easily. "She's fine." That's what I had always said, but this time, the word caught in my throat. "She's busy," I said instead. My sister was quiet for a moment. Then, gently, "Busy is not the same as fine." I smiled faintly even though she couldn't see me. "You worry too much," I said. "Someone has to," she replied. We moved on to other topics after that, but her words lingered. Busy is not the same as fine. On Sunday, I didn't set the table. I told myself I wouldn't, and this time I didn't. I made 1 cup of tea, 1 plate. I sat by the window as I always did, but the room felt different, not emptier, just quieter in a way that felt more permanent. Around 3:30, my phone buzzed, a message from Daphne. "Sorry, Mom, won't be able to talk today. Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen, read it again, and again. There was nothing wrong with the message, nothing unkind, nothing cold, but there was something missing, something that used to be there, a softness, a sense that I mattered in the moment she was writing it. Instead, it felt like an update, a notification, something you send so you don't have to explain later. I typed a response. "Of course, take care." Then I erased it, typed again. "All right, let me know when you're free." Erased that too. Finally, I wrote "okay," just that one word. It felt appropriate somehow. That evening, I found myself standing in front of the old photo cabinet in the living room. I hadn't opened it in months, maybe longer. Inside were albums, stacks of them, some labeled, some not. I pulled one out at random, sat down, opened it slowly. The first photo was from Daphne's 8th birthday. She was standing in the backyard holding a small cake with both hands. Her smile was wide, unfiltered, the kind of smile that didn't know how to hide anything. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger. Then turned the page. There were more school events, holidays, small moments I had insisted on capturing even when Everett used to tease me about it. "You'll remember anyway," he'd say, but I hadn't trusted memory alone. I wanted proof, evidence that these moments had existed, that they had been real. Halfway through the album, I found a photo I didn't remember taking. Daphne was older in this one, maybe in her early 20s. She was sitting at this very table, looking down at something in her hands. Her expression was serious, focused, not unhappy, but not open either. I stared at that photo for a long time because something about it felt familiar, not from the past, but from now. I closed the album gently, placed it back in the cabinet. And for the first time, a thought came to me that I hadn't allowed before. Maybe this wasn't new, maybe she hadn't changed, maybe I had just stopped noticing the distance as it grew, little by little, year by year. Until now, when it had become something I could no longer ignore. That night I didn't call her, I didn't text, I didn't wait for the phone to ring. Instead, I sat in the quiet of the house, listening, not for footsteps, not for the door, but for something else, something I couldn't quite name yet. And then 3 days later, I saw something, by accident, something small, something ordinary, but it carried a truth that she had never spoken out loud, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I wasn't looking for anything. That's the truth. At my age, you don't go searching for trouble in places you don't belong. You learn to stay within your routines, your quiet corners. That morning I had gone into town to return a blouse I had bought the week before. It didn't fit quite right around the shoulders, too tight when I reached forward, the kind of discomfort that seems small until you live with it for a few hours. The shop was busy, too bright, too loud. I remember thinking I should have come earlier. I stood in line, holding the folded blouse against my arm, watching the young girl at the counter smile at each customer with the same practiced expression. When it was my turn, I handed it over, nodded politely, and stepped aside. That's when I saw her, not clearly at first. Just a movement in the reflection of the glass display behind the counter. A familiar posture, the way she tilted her head slightly when she listened. I turned, and there she was, Daphne, standing just outside the cafe across the street. She was laughing. Not the small, polite laugh I had heard on the phone in recent months. This was different, open, unrestrained, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep and unguarded. For a moment I didn't move, I just watched. Because I hadn't seen that version of her in a long time, then I noticed she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, tall, dark hair, his body angled toward her in a way that felt close, familiar. He said something and she reached out, touching his arm lightly. It was such a small gesture, but it carried something I recognized immediately. Comfort, ease, something that didn't need explanation. I don't know how long I stood there, a few seconds maybe, long enough for something quiet inside me to settle into place. Not panic, not anger, just understanding. So this was what she hadn't told me. I stepped out of the shop slowly. The air outside felt cooler than I expected. Or maybe it was just me. I didn't approach them. I didn't call out her name. Instead, I stayed where I was, a short distance away. Close enough to see, far enough not to interrupt. They moved toward the cafe door together. He held it open for her. She smiled at him again, then they went inside. And just like that, they were gone from my sight. I could have walked in. There was nothing stopping me. I could have said, Daphne, could have smiled, pretended surprise. Oh, I didn't know you were here. It would have been easy, natural even, but something held me back, not fear, not hesitation. Just a quiet sense that this moment wasn't meant to include me, not because I wasn't welcome, but because I hadn't been invited. I turned and walked home, slowly, without stopping anywhere else. The streets felt longer than usual, the familiar corners slightly unfamiliar. As if something had shifted in the way I moved through them. When I reached my front door, I stood there for a moment before unlocking it. I wasn't tired, but I felt heavy, not in my body, in my thoughts. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. The chair by the window, the folded blanket on the armrest, the faint smell of tea still lingering in the air. I set my bag down, took off my shoes, and sat, not thinking, just sitting, letting the moment settle. It wasn't the fact that she was seeing someone. That part I understood. It was the absence of it. The space where that information should have been, the quiet decision she had made not to share it with me. Later that evening, she called. Her name appeared on the screen like it always had. Familiar, expected. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, Mom. Hi, I said. Her voice sounded normal, calm. There was no trace of the laughter I had seen earlier. How was your day? She asked. It was fine, I replied, a small pause. And yours? Busy, she said. Work's been a lot lately. I closed my eyes briefly, not in frustration, just to steady something inside me. I was in town today, I said. Oh, she replied. There was a slight shift in her tone, almost imperceptible. Yes, I continued, near the cafe on Main Street. Another pause, this one longer. I see, she said. I waited. She didn't ask what I had seen, didn't ask if I had seen her. Instead, she moved on. I've been meaning to tell you something, she said. I opened my eyes. Yes, I've been spending time with someone. There it was, carefully placed, measured, as if she had rehearsed it. That's nice, I said softly. He's important to me. I'm glad, I replied. And I meant it, truly, but beneath that there was something else, something quieter, something she still wasn't saying. What's his name? I asked. Ethan, she said. The name settled between us, simple, uncomplicated, but it carried weight. How long have you known him? I continued. A while, she replied, not specific, not open, just enough. I saw you today, I said gently. The silence that followed was immediate, heavy, not surprised, just still. Oh, she said finally. Yes. Another pause. I was going to tell you, she added. I know, I said. And I did, in her own time, in her own way, when it suited her. He's good to me, Mom, she said. There was something in her voice now, a quiet insistence. as if she needed me to understand that part above all else. "I'm sure he is," I replied. I leaned back in my chair, looked toward the window. The light outside had begun to fade. "I just didn't want to complicate things," she continued. "Complicate what?" I asked. Another pause. "My life," she said. The words were simple, but they landed differently, not harsh, not cruel, just honest. And in that honesty, there was a truth she hadn't intended to say out loud. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand," I said, and I did more than she realized. Because in that moment, it became clear I wasn't part of the complication she was trying to avoid. I was the complication. We spoke for a few more minutes after that, about small things, safe things. The conversation moved carefully around the truth we had both touched but not fully addressed. Then she said she had to go. "Talk soon," she added. "Yes," I said. "Soon." After the call ended, I didn't move right away. I sat there, listening to the quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just clear. For the first time, I wasn't guessing. I wasn't trying to fill in the spaces she left behind. I could see them now, clearly defined, intentional. She hadn't pushed me away, not directly. She had simply built a life that didn't include me in the places that mattered most. And I had let it happen, step by step, silence by silence, believing that giving her space meant I would always have a place. That night, I didn't open the photo cabinet. I didn't look back. Instead, I sat with the present, with what I now knew. And for the first time, I began to wonder something I hadn't allowed myself before. Not what she was hiding, but why she felt the need to hide it from me at all. Because somewhere in that answer was the truth about everything that had changed, and everything that had been quietly lost along the way. After that call, something inside me grew still, not calm, not peaceful. Just still, the way a room feels after someone leaves and closes the door gently behind them. Nothing is disturbed, and yet everything has changed. The next few days passed quietly. I followed my routines, tea in the morning, watering the plants, a short walk in the afternoon. But I noticed something different in the way I moved through these moments. I was no longer waiting, not for her call, not for her visit, not for an explanation that would make everything feel the way it used to. Instead, I was observing not just her, but myself. I began to revisit small memories, not the big ones, not birthdays or holidays, but the quiet in-between moments. The ones that usually pass without meaning until you look at them again. And this time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. There was a Sunday years ago. Daphne had just started her first job. She came over, sat exactly where she always did, and told me about her day. Not everything, just enough. There was a part where she hesitated, a story she started then stopped halfway. I remember asking what happened next. She had smiled. "Nothing important," she said, and I let it go. At the time, it felt like respect, like trust. I wasn't the kind of mother who pushed, who demanded to know every detail. I believed that if something mattered, she would tell me. But now, sitting alone in my quiet living room, I wondered, what if she had been waiting for me to ask again? Not insist, not pressure, just show that I wanted to know. Another memory surfaced. This one sharper. Daphne in her late 20s. She had come over unexpectedly. No pastries that day, no careful timing. She stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. Her eyes looked tired, not physically, something deeper. "Everything okay?" I had asked. "Yes," she said quickly, too quickly. We sat, drank tea, spoke about small things, safe things. She left earlier than usual, and I didn't stop her. I didn't say, "You seem different." I didn't ask, "Do you want to talk?" I let her go, because I thought if she needed me, she would stay. Now, years later, that moment felt different. It felt like a door that had been opened, just slightly, and I had chosen not to walk through it. I wasn't blaming myself, not exactly, but I was beginning to understand something uncomfortable. Distance doesn't always come from one person walking away. Sometimes it's built quietly between two people who both believe they are doing the right thing. On Thursday afternoon, my sister came by unannounced. She did that sometimes, knocked twice, then let herself in before I could answer. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, setting her bag down like she owned the place. I smiled. "You're never in this neighborhood." She waved it off. "That's not the point." We sat in the kitchen. I made tea. She watched me carefully, the way she always did when she sensed something beneath the surface. "You've been quiet," she said. "I'm always quiet," I replied. "Not like this," she said. I didn't answer. I poured the tea instead. "She hasn't been coming around, has she?" My sister continued. I paused just for a second. No, I said finally. My sister nodded slowly. I thought so. There was no judgment in her voice, no surprise, just recognition, as if she had been expecting this long before I had allowed myself to see it. She's busy, I added, the same word I had used before, the same word that had started to lose its meaning. My sister gave me a look, not unkind, but clear. Busy people still make time for what matters, she said. I sat down across from her. Wrapped my hands around the warm cup. She said things are different now, I told her. My sister leaned back slightly. And what do you think that means? I stared into my tea. I think her life doesn't include me the way it used to. The words felt strange as they left my mouth, not because they were new, but because I was finally saying them out loud. My sister was quiet for a moment, then she said something I wasn't expecting. Did you ever include yourself? I looked up. What do you mean? I mean, she said gently, did you ever step into her life or did you just wait for her to bring pieces of it to you? The question settled between us, heavy, not accusatory, but precise. I didn't want to interfere, I said. I know, she replied. You never do. That was the problem, not interference, absence. She's always been independent, I continued. And you've always respected that, my sister said, maybe a little too much. I let out a small breath, not frustration, just acknowledgement. I thought giving her space meant she would come back to me, I said. My sister nodded. Sometimes, she said, space just becomes distance. We sat in silence after that, not uncomfortable, just full. Before she left, my sister stood by the door and looked at me. You still have time, she said. For what? To decide whether you want to be part of her life or just someone she updates. After she left, I stood there for a long time. Her words echoing softly in the quiet house. That evening, I didn't wait for Daphne to call. I picked up the phone myself, not immediately, not impulsively. I sat with the decision first, turned it over in my mind, felt its weight. Then slowly I dialed her number. It rang 3 times, then 4. On the 5th, she answered. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded surprised, not annoyed, not distant, just unprepared. Hi, I said. I was just about to step out, she added quickly. Of course she was, I almost smiled. I won't keep you long, I said, a small pause. Okay. I took a breath, not deep, just enough. I'd like to meet him, I said, silence complete. Ethan, I added gently. I'd like to meet him. Her reaction wasn't immediate, she didn't say yes. She didn't say no, she simply paused, as if the idea itself needed time to settle. Why? She asked finally. The question wasn't defensive, it was genuine, and that, more than anything, told me how far apart we had become. Because he's important to you, I said. And you're important to me? Another silence, softer this time. I don't know if that's a good idea, she said. The words were careful, measured, just like everything else she had been saying lately. Why not? I asked. There it was again, that pause. That space where the truth lived. It's just, she began, then stopped. I don't want things to be complicated. The same word, again, I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. I understand, I said, and I did, but this time. Understanding didn't mean stepping back. I'm not asking to change anything, I continued. I just want to meet the person who makes you laugh like that. The line went quiet, completely still. You saw that? She asked softly. Yes, another pause. But this one felt different, not closed, not distant, just uncertain. Okay, she said finally. The word was quiet, careful, but it was there. Okay, I repeated. We'll figure something out, she added. And just like that, something shifted, not everything, not yet, but something. After the call ended, I sat back in my chair. The house felt the same, the quiet unchanged. But inside me there was a small movement, not hope, not relief, just presence. For the first time in a long while, I hadn't waited, I hadn't stepped back. I hadn't told myself it was enough to stay where I was. I had reached forward, gently, carefully, but deliberately. And now all that remained was to see what would happen when she reached back. The meeting was set for the following Sunday, not at my house. That had been Daphne's suggestion. There's a place we like, she said. It's quieter, neutral. I understood what she meant. My home carried history, memories, expectations. This would not. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The kind of place you might walk past without noticing unless you already knew it was there. When I arrived, they were already seated. Daphne saw me first. She stood up halfway as if unsure whether to come toward me or wait. I closed the distance. We hugged, briefly, carefully. There was a familiarity in it, but also something restrained, as if we were both aware that something delicate stood between us. "Mom," she said, stepping slightly to the side, "this is Ethan." I turned to him. He stood up immediately, polite, attentive. "Nice to meet you," he said. His voice was steady, warm, but not overly familiar. "Nice to meet you too," I replied. We shook hands. His grip was firm but not forceful. There was something measured about him, the way he looked at me, direct but not intrusive. We sat. The waitress came by. Daphne ordered for herself. Ethan did the same. I asked for tea, of course. At first, the conversation moved slowly, carefully. Daphne spoke more than usual, filling the space, explaining things that didn't need explaining. As if she was trying to manage the air between us. Ethan, on the other hand, didn't rush. He listened, answered when spoken to, asked small questions. Nothing too personal, nothing too distant, just enough to keep the conversation balanced. "What do you do?" I asked him at one point. "I work in project management," he said, "mostly corporate clients." I nodded. "That sounds structured." He smiled slightly. "It has to be." Daphne glanced between us, watching, not tense but attentive. As if she was waiting for something to go wrong. I studied him quietly, not in a critical way, just observing the way he sat, the way he spoke, the way he looked at Daphne when she talked. There was care there, not performative, not exaggerated, just present. At one point, Daphne excused herself to take a call outside. "I'll be right back," she said, and just like that, it was only the two of us. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was honest. "She talks about you," Ethan said after a moment. I looked at him. "Does she?" He nodded. "Not in great detail," he added carefully, "but enough." I smiled faintly. "That sounds like her." He hesitated just briefly, then said, "She worries about you." That caught me off guard. "Worries," I repeated. "Yes," he said, "she thinks you might feel alone." I sat back slightly. The words settled somewhere deep. "Alone." "I'm not," I said, and I meant it. "At least I thought I did," he nodded. I told her that might not be something she gets to decide. I looked at him again, more closely this time. "That's an interesting thing to say," I replied. He shrugged lightly. "I think sometimes we try to protect people by creating distance," he said. "But we don't always realize what that distance actually does." His words were calm, not accusatory, not pointed, but they carried weight. "Daphne has always valued independence," I said. "Yes," he agreed, "she does. And she believes that giving space is a form of respect," I added. He nodded again. "She does that with everyone." There was something in the way he said it, something that suggested he had seen this pattern before, not just with me. "But respect," he continued carefully, "can sometimes look like absence if there's nothing to hold it in place." I didn't respond immediately because I understood what he meant, more than I expected to. Before I could say anything else, Daphne returned. Her presence shifted the air again. Lightened it, controlled it. "Sorry," she said, sitting back down. "Work." "Of course," I replied. The rest of the meeting passed without tension. We spoke about simple things, work, the city, a restaurant they liked, nothing too deep, nothing too revealing, but beneath it all, there was something unspoken, a quiet awareness that this wasn't just a casual meeting. It was a test, not of Ethan, not of me, but of whether there was still a place where the three of us could exist together. When it was time to leave, we stood outside the cafe. The air was cool, the street quieter than before. "It was nice meeting you," Ethan said. "You too," I replied, and I meant it. Daphne hugged me again, slightly longer this time, but still careful. "Take care, Mom," she said. "You too," I answered. I watched them walk away together, side by side, not touching, but close enough that they didn't need to. I didn't feel replaced. That wasn't it. What I felt was repositioned. As if I had been gently moved from the center of her life to its edge, still present, but no longer essential to its movement. That evening I didn't feel sad, I didn't feel angry, I felt clear. Because for the first time I could see everything as it was, not as I remembered it, not as I hoped it might be, but as it existed now. And in that clarity, a quiet decision began to form, not about her, not about Ethan, but about myself. Because being part of someone's life is not the same as being included in it. And I realized something else, something even more important. I had spent so long waiting to be invited into her world, that I had forgotten to ask whether I still wanted to stand outside it. That night I didn't call her, I didn't replay the conversation, I didn't search for hidden meanings. Instead, I sat in my chair by the window, the same place I had sat for years. But this time I wasn't looking outward, I was looking inward, and what I saw there would change the way everything unfolded next. Because the next time Daphne and I spoke, I wasn't going to ask for space or wait for it to be given. I was going to tell her something she hadn't expected to hear, something I hadn't expected to say, and once those words were spoken, there would be no returning to the quiet distance we had both been living in. The call happened 3 days later. I didn't plan it the way I used to plan things. There was no careful timing, no rehearsed sentences, just a quiet certainty that if I didn't speak now, I would return to the same silence we had both been living in, and this time I didn't want that. It was early evening. The light outside had softened, settling into that gentle gray that makes everything feel slower. I had just finished washing the dishes. My hands were still slightly damp when I picked up the phone. For a moment I held it without dialing, not hesitating. Just acknowledging the weight of what I was about to do, then I called. She answered quickly. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was calm, familiar, but I could hear it now, the carefulness, the way she kept things level, controlled. "Hi," I said, "is everything okay?" She asked. There was a slight shift in her tone, concern, not alarm, just attention. "Yes," I replied, "everything is fine." A pause. "Okay," she said slowly. "I've been thinking," I continued, and I meant it, not just about her, about everything. About the way we had built this relationship over the years, piece by piece, carefully, quietly. "About what?" she asked. I sat down. The chair creaked softly beneath me, a sound she would recognize if she were here. "About us," I said. The silence on the other end wasn't immediate. It arrived gradually, like something settling into place. "I see," she said. Her voice had changed, not distant, but attentive in a different way, as if she understood that this wasn't a casual conversation. "I realized something," I said. I didn't rush the words, I let them come the way they needed to, slow, clear. "I've spent a long time trying not to get in your way." No response, but I could hear her breathing, soft, steady. "I thought that was what you needed," I continued. "Space, independence, room to live your life without feeling pulled back." "That's not," she began, but I didn't stop her sharply. I simply continued, gently. "I'm not saying it was wrong," I said. "I think it came from a good place, from both of us." She didn't interrupt again, but somewhere along the way, I added, that space became something else. The word hung there, unfinished, but understood. "Distance," she said quietly. "Yes." There it was, spoken out loud, not hidden, not softened. Another silence followed, but this one felt different, not empty, not avoided, just honest. "I didn't know how to change it," she said after a moment. Her voice was softer now, less controlled. "I know," I replied. "And neither did I." I leaned back slightly. "Let the chair hold me." "So I waited," I said. "I told myself you would come to me when you were ready. And I told myself you were fine," she said. The words came quickly, almost overlapping mine. "I thought you liked your routine, your quiet. I didn't want to disrupt that." I closed my eyes briefly, not in pain, just recognition. "That's the thing," I said. "We were both trying not to disrupt each other. And in doing that," she added slowly, "we stopped reaching for each other." Yes, there was a shift then, subtle but real. The conversation was no longer about what had happened. It was about understanding why. "I saw you the other day," I said. "At the cafe." "I know," she replied. "I've been thinking about that too." Her voice carried something new, not guilt, not defensiveness, just reflection. "I didn't tell you about Ethan because," she paused, then continued more carefully, "because I didn't know where you fit into that part of my life." The words were honest, painfully so, but not unkind. "And I didn't ask," I said, "because I didn't want to make you feel like you had to include me." We both fell quiet again. It was strange, hearing it all laid out like this. So simple, so clear. "I thought keeping things separate would make everything easier," she said. "For who?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away because she already knew. "For me," she said finally. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "There's nothing wrong with building your own life," I said. "You should." "I know," she replied. But I continued, "I don't want to be someone you keep on the outside of it." The words were steady, not demanding, not pleading, just true. "I don't need to be part of everything," I added. "But I do need to know that I still belong somewhere in your life." The silence that followed was the longest yet. I didn't fill it, I didn't soften it, I let it be because some answers need space. You do, she said finally. Her voice was quiet but certain. You do belong. I listened carefully, not to the words, but to what sat behind them. Then show me, I said, not as a challenge, not as a demand, just an invitation. Another pause, shorter this time. I don't know how, she admitted. And there it was, not resistance, not rejection, just uncertainty. That's all right, I said. We can figure it out. The word felt different now, not assumed, not automatic, chosen. I'd like that, she said. Her voice had changed again, softer, less guarded. Me too, I replied. We didn't talk much longer after that. We didn't need to. The important things had already been said. When the call ended, I didn't sit in silence the way I used to. I didn't replay every word, search for hidden meanings. Because this time there weren't any. Everything had been spoken, clearly, honestly. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet in my house didn't feel like something I was waiting inside. It felt like something I was choosing. That night I made 2 cups of tea, not by accident, not out of habit. I placed one on the table and sat with the other. I didn't imagine her there, I didn't pretend. I simply allowed the space to exist, not empty, not full, just open, because that's what we had finally created, not distance, not silence. But space that could be stepped into, from both sides. And for the first time I believed that maybe, just maybe, we both would. The changes didn't happen overnight. They weren't dramatic. No sudden closeness, no long emotional speeches, just small shifts. The kind you might miss if you were still expecting things to look the way they used to. The following week, Daphne called me first. That in itself wasn't new, but the way she spoke was, "Hi, Mom, do you have a minute?" A minute. It sounded ordinary. But there was something in her tone. She wasn't filling space, she was making it. "Yes," I said, "of course. I'm going to the market this weekend," she said. "There's this place Ethan likes. I thought maybe you'd want to come." I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to understand what she was really offering. This wasn't a visit, not in the old sense. This wasn't Sunday at 3 with pastries and familiar chairs. This was something new, something that didn't belong to me. Something she was choosing to open. "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it, not because it was what we used to do, but because it wasn't. The market was busy, louder than the cafe, less controlled. People moving in every direction, voices overlapping, the scent of fresh bread and spices carried through the air. Daphne stood near one of the stalls when I arrived, Ethan beside her. She waved when she saw me, a small gesture, but it felt unguarded. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. This time the hug was different, not longer, but easier, less measured. We walked together, not in a straight line, stopping here and there, looking at things, commenting on small details. At one point, Daphne picked up a piece of fruit and turned to me. "Do you still like these?" she asked. It caught me off guard, not the question itself, but the way she asked it. As if she was trying to remember something she hadn't checked in a long time. "Yes," I said, "I do." She nodded, placed a few in the basket. It was such a small thing, but it stayed with me because it wasn't about the fruit. It was about noticing. Ethan walked slightly ahead at times, then beside us, never between, never pulling her away. At one stall he turned to me. "They have good tea here," he said. "Daphne mentioned you like it." I looked at her, she shrugged lightly. "I remember some things," she said. I smiled. "Some things are enough," I replied. We didn't talk about the past, not directly. We didn't revisit the distance, or the silence. Instead, we moved forward, carefully, not pretending nothing had happened. But not letting it define every moment either. Later, we sat on a bench with paper cups in our hands, tea for me, coffee for them. For a while, we just sat, watching people pass, listening to the hum of the market around us. Then Daphne spoke. Not to fill the silence, but to enter it. "I used to think if I built my life right, everything would fit neatly," she said. I didn't interrupt. "Work, relationships, family, all in their own places." She looked down at her cup. "But it doesn't really work like that." "No," I said softly, "it doesn't." She glanced at me, then back ahead. "I think I was afraid," she continued. "Of what?" I asked. She took a breath. "Of disappointing you," she said. The words were quiet, but they carried something deep, something that had been sitting there for a long time. I turned slightly toward her. "Why would you think that?" I asked. "Because you always seemed steady," she said, "certain, like you already knew how things should be." I thought about that, not defensively, just honestly. "I wasn't certain," I said. "I just didn't want to make things harder for you." She nodded slowly, and I didn't want to make things harder for you either. We both smiled faintly. Because now it was clear, we hadn't been protecting each other, we had been avoiding each other, gently, carefully for years. I should have told you about Ethan sooner, she said. Maybe, I replied, but I could have asked sooner too. She looked at me. Really looked, not past me, not around me. I don't want to do that anymore, she said. Keep parts of my life separate like that. Neither do I answered. Ethan, who had been quietly listening, spoke then. I think you're both doing something most people don't, he said. We turned to him. You're not pretending nothing happened, he continued. But you're also not letting it stop you from moving forward. I considered that, then nodded. It took us a while, I said. Most things worth understanding do, he replied. The afternoon passed slowly after that, not in a heavy way, in a steady way. When it was time to leave, we stood together for a moment, not rushing, not lingering too long. Come by next Sunday, I said to Daphne. The words came naturally, not as a return to the past, but as an option. She thought about it just briefly. Maybe, she said, then added, or you could come to mine. I paused. Not because I didn't want to, but because I understood what that meant. Her space, her life, her world. I'd like that, I said, and I did. That evening back home, I sat by the window again, the same chair, the same view. But everything felt different, not because my life had changed completely, but because something inside it had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore, not for her to return, not for things to go back to the way they were, because they wouldn't. And for the first time, I didn't want them to. What we had now wasn't the same as before. It wasn't as easy, it wasn't as predictable, but it was real, built not on habit, not on assumption, but on something we had both chosen to step into: understanding, effort, presence. Later that night, I stood in the kitchen. The kettle clicked softly as it finished boiling. I poured the tea, 1 cup. I looked at the second cup, the one I used to set without thinking. I didn't reach for it, not this time. Because I knew something now, something simple but important. I wasn't losing her. I had just been standing in the wrong place. And now we were both learning how to meet each other again, not as we were, but as we had become. Before I went to bed, I paused by the window. The house was quiet, still, but it didn't feel empty. It felt open, and that I realized was enough. Closing reflections / audience connection 200-300 words. Sometimes we think love means stepping back, giving space. Not asking too many questions, not getting in the way, and sometimes that's true, but sometimes love also means stepping forward, gently, honestly, even when you're not sure how it will be received. I spent years believing that if I gave my daughter enough room, she would always find her way back to me. What I didn't understand was this: space without connection can quietly turn into distance. And distance, if left alone long enough, can start to feel like absence. But it doesn't have to end there. Not if both people are willing to see it, to name it, and to reach for each other again. So I want to ask you something. If someone you love has grown distant, would you wait for them to come back? Or would you take that small, difficult step forward and meet them halfway? If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts, because sometimes hearing someone else's truth helps us understand our own a little better.